Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the modding series for Pavlov. So today we are going to be picking up where we left off in the last video, and we are going to be converting this DM example that we had made into a TDM example. What I'm going to be doing is similar to the FY Ice World maps from the original Counter-Strike. So we're going to try and create this little TDM match. It'll be a 60-second match. Once all players die or 60 seconds pass, it will restart the round and respawn everyone back in, as well as respawn all of the guns. So I'll be covering the entire setup in this video outside of the mapping part of this, because there is quite a bit of information online as far as mapping goes. You just do a YouTube search for UE4 mapping. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. Alright, let's go ahead and pop open our Pavlov game logic example. And once again, I'm going to be trying to do most of this from scratch. I have already figured out the example in a different project, as you had just saw when I dragged that over to the screen, but I'm going to try not to look at that and do it all from scratch so I could explain it as I'm going through. There's a couple things that I'd like to note. In the last video we were using a connected players array, which you could do if you're keeping very good track of all of the players that are in your game. But I'm going to show you guys a more simplistic method that I think will be better for the majority of people. So I did show you guys the get game state, cast to game state, and get the player array. This array will contain all players that are within the game. So let's go ahead and turn this into a pure function to make it easy to use. So I'll right click it, collapse to function, and we will call this get players. We'll go inside there. We will add a return node. You could drag the output of your player array right to the return node, and it will go ahead and make that for you. And then we will click on either the return node or the starting node, and we will click pure. The reason we want to go ahead and do this is because then it does not require an execution pin to pull the information from here. We should always be able to complete this cast. If we can't, we've probably got bigger problems on our hands. But I would recommend that you guys do a little research on pure nodes before you go ahead and use them for everything. It's not something that you want to do with the majority of your functions, such as something like this, but it is possible to use a return node or a pure node, so I wanted to get you guys familiar. Now that we've gone ahead and covered how we can get all of the connected players in the game, let's go ahead and remove some of the variables and old functions that we will no longer need. So if we go ahead and delete the connected players variable, it'll say that it is in use already, and we do want to delete it. If we compile, it'll show us where all of our errors are. So we can see add players to connected players is no longer going to be in use. Same with remove players from connected players. We'll go ahead and delete both of those. Also, I should note here, if you do want to manually assign teams, you can leave on assigned team. But if we go ahead and delete that, it will use the default logic for deciding which team player should go on, which is perfect for what we want to do with Team Deathmatch. Now we also have one more that we need to delete, or two more rather, and that would be these two inside the graph. So event on player spawn, we no longer need to add them to the array. Also, since all of the items will be in the level, we no longer need to give them any starting items. If you'd like to go ahead and tweak this to potentially give them a knife or a pistol, something along those lines, feel free to, but this was covered in the last video, so I'm not going to go over that again today. We'll also remove the players from connected players array. And now we should be on a clean slate. Once again, this will just make it easier, as you could pull all of your players from this array, and I'll cover an example later on for how we could figure out what team they are on or if they are dead or alive. Another thing that I would like to note is we are no longer going to be using begin play to switch rounds. There's a better method that I'll cover in a little bit for going about that. And outside of that, the majority of the setup will stay the same, but I will cover the changes. And we will go up to our game mode properties. From here we are going to turn off no teams. We could also turn off force no scoring if we would like to use automatic scoring for team-based game modes. This will just use the generic TDM scoring for the teams overall, but we'll go ahead and leave that on. I'm going to leave a 10-point scoring method in from the prior video, so we'll just award players. This is just going to be a pug match, so it's not going to be anything super serious, so we're not going to award them team-based scores, but we could. Outside of that, our setup will basically just remain the same from the last video. Nothing really is going to change there. So on begin play, we're just going to go ahead and start our match timer. This will just run for 60 minutes and then it will end the match, either forcing everyone back to the lobby if it's a lobby-based mode, or if it's on a custom server, it should rotate it to the next map. This was also covered in the last video, so I will not go over that again. Now, the one thing that we do need to change is on player killed, we will award the players, but we also need to check if there's still anyone left from a team, and if there's not anyone left from one team or another that is still alive, we want to go ahead and end the match, basically restarting the next match. So let's create a function for that. We will call this get alive players. We are going to use our get players pure node that we had made prior to. We're going to do a for each loop to iterate through each entry in the array. Sorry about that. And we will do get Pavlov player status. From here we will throw a branch off of succeed, and we will break the player status. We would also like to know at this point whether they are dead or alive, so we'll grab a branch off of dead. And we are going to create two local variables for this function. You should also, I should note here that you should put a prefix of L to specify that it is a local variable, and we will call this team1 count. And this needs to be an integer for the variable type. And if you hit Control W on the variable, you will duplicate it. From there, we're just going to go over and set that to team0 count. So we'll drag both of these out. You could hold Control and drag to get a get node, or you could Alt drag out, and that will get you a set node. From here, we're going to drag off the team ID, and we're going to do a switch on integer. We will add two pins, 0 and 1. These are our two teams, and this will only be if dead is false, meaning they are alive. So we will go ahead at this point and do ++, which will increment the integer, and we will do the same for player 1 count, ++. This will iterate through all of our players, and we will check to see what team they are on if they are not dead, and then we will add them to that team count. So what we could do here is click our begin node for this function, and we want to add an output. We can go ahead and delete the default output that it gives us, and we will copy these over here and pass them into the return node. Going to go ahead and remove the L off of this. Now that we've got all of our player counts, we are going to wrap this in another function, and this will be check restart round. Here we want to see if the game is in started. Basically, if it's in the starting state, that means we know we're in play. That way we don't accidentally restart the round or create any infinite loops. So we want to get the round state, check if it is equal to started. If it is, we'll toss a branch off of there. Want to note you could also use a switch node here if you wanted to change your behavior depending on which state you're in, but that's not the case here. We just want to know if we were inside one state, so make it a little bit simpler. Now if we are, we want to get alive players. We want to check if they are greater than or equal to 1. Now we are going to use an AND node, and we'll basically ensure that both of these are greater than or equal to 1, and if they are not, then that is when we would like to end the round. So if this is false, we want to set our round state to ending or ended. Now I should note that event on player killed. If you would like to do these checks with the killed player's player status, we should note at this point dead will have not flipped over, so we need to put a small delay after the fact to check. And we are also going to use a retriggerable delay. That way if people continue to die, we'll just hit this, it'll retrigger the delay to wait 1 second until people stop dying for a full second. So prevent us from doing too many checks in the case of a lot of people dying. If you were to use a regular delay, it would wait the 1 second, and if any other, if this event were to fire again, it would basically hit this node, and if it was still running the delay, it would not continue until the delay was up. We just basically want to wait 1 second after this node is hit, no matter what the case is. Otherwise, it could be 0.2 seconds where you hit this node, there's 0.2 seconds left on the delay. Once that completes, it'll check, and depending on the offset, more or less, that we get on players dying, it may produce inaccurate results. So a retriggerable delay will make sure we wait the full 1 second after a player dies. So now that we've done that, this will handle our end round state, depending on how many players are left alive. Also, I should note that after the 60 seconds are up, it will go ahead and restart the round regardless. So this will be a max of 60 seconds. You can increase that timer if you'd like, but I'm just going to keep it very simple today. So event on round begin. We should also note that we would want to toss a small delay in here, and I will explain why. Because we went ahead and removed our begin play, that would start it after 4 to 5 seconds, basically waiting for all the players, and then we would do that check. We're instead just going to wait 4 seconds because this will run when the game starts. So once the game starts, we wait 4 seconds for players to connect, and we go ahead and start a round. Should also note that it is a good idea to put a small delay in between your round states changing, which we did in the last video. Right here we go to standby, we wait a second. After we disable their movement, we re-enable their movement after that second, and then we go to started. Basically the round is in play at that point. Now, event on round end, because we went ahead and deleted the connected players array, we're going to go ahead and remove this old logic that we were using, and we will get players. This will allow us to iterate through all of the players that are in the game. And note on event on round end, we're just iterating through all of the players and we are killing them all. We're doing a 2-second delay, and then we are calling a post-round cleanup. This will remove all of the guns and bodies that are in the level that are lying around, not the spawners. Once we do that, we go to starting, which basically comes over here, waits 4 seconds, and then we go ahead and we spawn in all of the players. Our round interface call will also remain the same, and that is about the gist of this example. I'll double check real quick to see if I've got anything else I could add to this for you guys, but this is going to be a short and simple one to make sure we correct some of the mistakes we made in the last one, show some simpler examples, as well as cover TDM. Alright, so I did forget one thing that I wanted to mention. So event on player spawned. When they spawn in, they're going to start with no Kevlar or helmet. So we're going to want to go ahead and add Kevlar and helmet. So we will break the Pavlov player status. We will get the player state and set player vitality. Here we are going to give them 100 health, 100 armor, and 1 for the helmet. And let's go ahead and collapse this to a function. Right click, collapse to function, set starting vitality. Just gonna go in here and clean up the node a little bit. And now I also want to cover another example. We've had requests for this in the past, and I wanted to show you guys how you could essentially get the character to change out the characters material or textures. I'll cover the full setup for this later on in a different video, but I wanted to give you guys the gist of how you can go ahead and get this information. So if we were to create a new function, and we will call this get Pavlov skeleton, and we are going to pass in a pawn for this, or actually we could go, we'll use a pawn. This will keep it simple. And this will be Pavlov pawn. Going to compile, and we will get Pavlov pawn, or get pav pawn. We will do a check is pav pawn. This will ensure that they are not a ghost character. Can do a branch off of that. If this is true, we want to get the pav pawn. We want to cast it to character. You could also use a character for your input node, which is what I was going to do originally. The main reason why I'm not doing that is if we were to get the Pavlov player status and break it, it will return a pawn. So this just allows you to plug the pawn straight into there. If this is true, it is a Pavlov pawn. We'll cast a character. We will get components by class. And we'd like to go ahead and get the skeletal mesh component. And index 1 is the index you were looking for. This is the third person skeleton, the one that everyone else sees on the server. And this will be our return node for this function. This will be skeleton, sk mesh. We also want to go ahead and add a boolean, and we will call this successful. In this case, it would be successful. If the cast failed for whatever reason, it would not be successful, as well as if this branch failed and it is not a Pavlov's pawn, it would not be successful. Now what this allows for you to do is get your pav skeleton, could do a branch off the return. If this is true, you could set material. I should note that this will not just replicate based off of this example. There's a little bit more to it if you'd like to get this replicated where everyone else could see it, similar to what we did in Jailbreaker Zombies, but I'll cover that in a later date. For now, we're still going to try and keep stuff simple. Potentially by part 4, part 5, we'll start getting into some of the replication stuff and how you can sync it up with join-in-progress players. Also, I should note another thing that we could do is add a do once to our round end to make sure that it does not get called twice for whatever reason. And we could reset the do once after we switch it over to round state starting. You can also go ahead and do that for on round begin if you'd like, but I'm fairly confident that we're not going to go ahead and call that twice. It's just that if we ran into the 60-second timer, we have also set up the check round state for, or the check restart round. We've set up an ended call right here, so it could trigger either by the 60 seconds passing or by one team having less than one player alive. I also should note that we could do this check restart round off of player left server. It shouldn't hurt anything, so why not add it there as well, in case someone leaves the server in the middle of the round. If they were alive, either or will basically trigger it to happen. Once again, since we have a do once here, we don't have to worry about this killing players or potentially happening twice. Now we'll go back to our map. I'm going to use the same testing map that we had used in the last video. I'm going to go ahead and basically remove everything from this level. And I'm going to show you the example for Team Deathmatch. So to start, we have our Pavlov game logic example on the level. I do not have my UGC created at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. We will create new. I'm going to go ahead and move my blueprints up to my UGC folder. and then I will fix up redirectors on the custom map tools content. Alright, so now we would like to search for Pavlov player starts, Pavlov spawns. We're going to drag these out into the level. I'm going to use dynamic only team, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate a couple of these over to give quite a few starting points. I'm also going to select them all, and we will go ahead and hold Alt to duplicate and drag them out. These I want to set to team ID 1, and I'm going to rotate them around. Next, I would like to set up the spawn points for all of our weapons. So we can go ahead and use the loot spawn proxy. And I'm going to set all of these to 1, which will basically trigger them to restart once, or respawn rather, once per round. Go ahead and change this out to an op. And I'm going to go ahead and go through all of these, and I'm not going to add every single weapon from the game. It'll be a little bit tedious. I'm sure you guys don't want to see me just duplicating things and retyping out a different spawn list, so we'll cut back in another minute or so once I've gone ahead and done that. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've set up all the loot spawners, so you can see we started with our one op, then I went through, alt-dragged a bunch of them out to duplicate them, added an LMG, AK-47, AR, AK-12, MP5 drum shotgun. Once again, the full list is pinned in the workshop channel. I make sure to keep that up to date as soon as a new weapon gets added. It's very easy for me to go in there and just edit that. I'll make sure eventually, hopefully by the time beta gets pushed to live, that we have all of the information up on the wiki as well. But just bear with me because we're going through and changing quite a bit of things day to day, so it's kind of easier for me just to update the workshop channel for this moment in time. At this point though, I'm going to be covering some requests that we've gotten from the Discord. So yeah, maybe cutting back and forth a little bit, or there may be a couple edits in here. Just bear with me through that. But let's go ahead and select all of the spawn points. So to do that, you can go to your world outliner. You can click the first spawn point. You can hold shift and then select the last one. It'll select all in between those two. And then let's go ahead and go over to our player start tag. We are going to pass in TDM for these because these are our team deathmatch spawns, and I'm going to show you why we would want to do this. So to make a simple example, I'm going to alt drag all of these spawns over, and we will change all of their team IDs to be -1. Basically these will be deathmatch spawn points. Obviously your setup would be vastly different, but I want to cover, if you want to have your map for both TDM and DM and you're using custom logic, this would be a somewhat simplistic method to make sure that these spawns aren't available in Team Deathmatch or in Deathmatch. So we've marked all of our Team Deathmatch spawns with the TDM player start tag. Now all of our Deathmatch spawns we are going to mark with DM for Deathmatch. And we are going to go into our Pavlov game logic example, and I'm going to show you a simple setup that will go ahead and remove them all on begin play. So we are going to do a get all actors of class. Oops. Get all actors of class. We're going to look for Pavlov spawn. We are going to do a for each loop through all of them. This will iterate through all of the Pavlov spawns. Next, we are going to get the Pavlov game mode. Get game mode type. Get Pavlov game mode type. And we will do a switch off of the game mode type. From here, we can get the player start tag, the tag that we had just marked. And we are going to do a switch off of that as well. Switch on name. Now for switch on name, you need to populate this manually. So if we were to click on the node after we've added a pin, you could come up here and you see we've got 0, which would be case 0. What we actually would like to do is name this to DM. So whenever we find a spawn that has the tag DM, we will go through this execution pin. And we are going to add another one here, and this will be TDM. So if we are in deathmatch and it is a DM spawn, we would like to go ahead and do nothing, but if it is a TDM spawn, let's add a reroute node so we have easy access to this. We would like to destroy it. Destroy the actor. Now for deathmatch, that's what we'd like to do, but say for, duplicate this over, for team deathmatch, we would like to destroy the deathmatch spawns. We could do the same for capture the flag, and we could do the same for search and destroy. Now for gun game, we could also come up here. We would like to destroy all the TDM spawns in gun game, so we are only using the DM spawns. Note you could do this a variety of ways, but I just wanted to provide you guys an example for how you can destroy the other spawns in the level. You could also go in and subclass these if you would like by creating a blueprint from it, and then you could do it within the actor itself, but this is just an easy example for the time being. I should also note that this would get hooked up to begin play. So when the game starts, we want to go through, find all of the spawn points, and destroy them if we are not using them for that game. I'm not going to be using this in my example, but I just wanted to provide this for you. I also want to mention one other thing. If we go into the loot spawner proxy, if you had wanted to weight your spawners, so that way you could have multiple null entries or multiple AKs within your spawner, you could weight it so there'd be a 25% chance nothing could spawn, or just to give you a rough idea of how you'd go about that. We have add unique in here, which would only allow one of each entry to get added to the array. We'd go ahead and remove that, and we will just use an add node instead. With this, you will now be allowed to weight your spawners, so you could have multiple none entries, which I could show you that really quick. If we were to come over here to this op spawn, note we only have one op spawning at this location. If we were to add 2 entries that have none, this would make it so there's only a 33.33% chance that the op would actually spawn then. Alternatively, if we were to add multiple ops and say a deagle, then you're going to weight it more towards the op versus the deagle. Obviously we have none in there, so I just wanted to make sure that I covered that for you guys, because it was set up with add unique, which would only allow one of each entry to go into the spawner. Alright, so we're about to wrap up this video. There's a couple last things that we have to do. Since this is a new project that I'm uploading, I need to go and set up my definition. This is covered in another video, so I'm just going to briefly blow through this. If you'd really like to see how this is all done properly, you can go back to the first video, and I cover this in much more detail than I'm going to, but I'm just going to name my map, select my map, going to change out the tags to be Team Deathmatch. I'm going to use custom game mode, add my game mode label, go down to the game logic, go select the definition from the game logic, save it all, drop down to Windows, Pavlov Workshop. I'm going to sync my metadata, which will upload the content from my definition, the name, thumbnail, all that good stuff. Then I'm going to go and deploy. Alright, from here I'll meet you guys back in Pavlov. Alright, now that we're in Pavlov, let's go ahead and play online, and we're going to start up a new server. This will be on Team Deathmatch, and then we will go to our YouTube map. So as you can see, we've spawned in after our 4-second delay. We've got all of our different weapons spawning in front of us. If you want, you could obviously put them a little higher up in the air so you don't have people bending over, but We got our 60-second timer counting down. When I go ahead and kill myself, it'll end the round. We'll go through the little loop with a couple delays, and then we will all spawn back in after the 4 seconds. And there you go. And over here on the other side, we would obviously have our opposite team IDs. As we can see, we are on red team right now, so that'd be team ID 1, I believe. And yeah, outside of that, if you guys have any questions, feel free to at me on the Discord, Mark Day. I'd appreciate it if you guys would watch through the videos, though, before sending me DMs, as it makes it rather difficult to make sure that we're on the same page if you guys haven't taken a look at what's going on. So, thank you guys.